I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest, stressing value creation over psychology, and of course, an author too, and the author of the book. It's all in your head, no other than Mr. Barry Wolfe. Welcome, Mr. Barry, and can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Sure. Thanks, Daniel, very much for having me. By the way, I'm a human resources executive for about 25 years. I got kind of bored after a while, and I left that and started my own human resources consulting business. And so, in the course of all that so I've been doing this now for about 30, going something or other over 30 years. And in the course of working with managers on problems, working with employees on problems, and trying to figure out, how do we do a better job of truly engaging people, helping leaders become better at what they do, I came to recognize that the typical ways we try to accomplish those things by using tools of applied psychology like personality testing, what they call competency modeling, and a lot of the kind of management theories that are we're training managers on, they're really not very effective. And there's a lot of reasons why. The first part of my book is really kind of a history and um, of about 100 years or so of the story of how we got these things into the workplace and why they really don't work. And then the second part of my book is what I do in a lot of my consulting business, which is really looking at how do we really connect employees to the value an organization exists to create. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what it's all about.
Mr. Barry Wolfe, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Hoping for more and more empowering books like this to come.
Hope
And
so.
your title is deliberately proactive. Are you arguing that psychology is entirely useless for a business, or is your critique more targeted on how it's commonly misspelled?
That's a great question, Daniel. I'm sure there are some people that are going to swear it does great things in their organizations, and that's fine. That's completely fine. But in the when I came to suspect that it's not really working out the way kind of the marketing says it's going to, I started to do some deeper dives into just, where did we get these things? Where did we get personality tests, for example, and why did they look the way they do? And what's really the underpinnings of these kinds of tools? And I was kind of shocked at how, frankly, really shallow a lot of this stuff is. And just between that and then my own experience with these kinds of tools in the workplace, they just didn't really seem to make much of a difference. And so, I as far as, and by the way, I want to stress, Daniel, there are people who use psychology, of course, like in the clinical sense, and sort of those kind of folks. Look, if they're saying they're being helped by these kind of tools, look, it's not for me to tell them they're wrong. So I'm not really talking about that aspect of the field, but I am talking about it the way it's used in the workplace. And so I just think there's I'm not asking anybody to look at this book and say this is the last word on the subject. I don't have a psychology degree. But I've spent several years researching this stuff, and I have a pretty extensive bibliography in this book. But I'm not expecting anybody to take this as the final say in the topic. But I do think of it as kind of a consumer report. It's just, hey, you've read the marketing stuff, and everybody believes what they believe about these tools. But here's a different side to this that's, I think people ought to really consider before, in particular, employers before they go spend a lot of money on these kind of things and expect them to have a significant impact on your business. And then so that's where I look at it with psychology. And then the second part is of the book is to say, okay, well, if that's not really the answer, well, what is? And what I try to do with that is go back to first principles, if you will, about why does a business exist, and which is really about how do you it exists to create value. It's not to make money. Money is the reward an organization gets for creating value, for delivering value. So then thinking about it in terms of how do you help employees actually help the business create value. So that's kind of the that's where I stand on, and I believe that doing that when you I've developed a 9-step process to help organizations do that. And I think when you start to understand work and employees and what it's all and leadership in the context of value creation, I think a lot of very interesting and very useful approaches start to open up in that approach. So that's what that's all about.
So, what is the most significant unintended consequence or intended consequence you've observed from companies overly relying on individual psychological
Yeah.
frameworks
You
to
know,
derive performance?
yeah. Uh, the I can look at it this you can look at it this way. I as I mentioned in the introduction to the book, every year organizations are spending billions of dollars on on leadership development based on theories of psychology. Spend about $2 billion a year on personality testing. Competency modeling it usually starts at around $150,000 a pop, and you have to update these things every 5 years. So there's a lot of money being spent on this, and you have to ask, well, what are we getting for this? And the Gallup organization reports that in 2024, only all of about 30% of American employees said they're actually engaged at work. You have, for all the money spent on leadership development, there's the McKinsey organization reported in 2022 only 11% of executives say their leadership development programs are actually meeting their organization's long-term needs. And our median turnover and employee tenure are some of the lowest that we've seen in some cases over 20 years. So we're shoving a lot of money and a lot of time at this stuff. And I don't think anybody can look at that kind of those kind of results in the aggregate and say that that this is really worth the all the time and the money we're spending.
Indeed, indeed. Mr. Barry, the phrase "it's all in your head" suggests the problem is in mental model. What is the fundamental misconception leaders have about the link between employee psychology and value creation?
Yeah. Well, the problem is that to be perfectly honest with you, and I come back to this kind of a recurring theme in the first part of my book. There's it's really surprising, but a lot of executives, and I mean like the presidents of a lot of businesses, really believe that these things are are quote unquote real. Like personality testing, for example. They really believe that there's a theoretical model that exists that is specific to their company, that every employee in a particular position has to fit if they're going to be successful, that they've got to have these certain qualities, what we call personality traits. And that's so we they make this sort of model, and then you kind of look at everybody that you're considering for a job, and you ask yourself, well, do they fit my model? No. Does this person fit my model? No, that person doesn't. And we don't really look at the fact that there's a lot of uh, evidence, I'm sorry, statistically, terms in various kinds of studies, and you can even see these things anecdotally, where that's not really how it works at all. People of all makeups, from personality or experience, whatever. Um, Lots of people can be successful in roles in ways that nobody would really anticipate. And so by looking at these, and by the way, these models at the end of the day, there's they're all just sort of garner created around abstractions about, things like, a, I don't know, initiative, for example. When, there's, and they sell this stuff like they call it science in selling it, but there's no scientific definition of initiative, and they talk about applying this kind of science in the workplace. There isn't, there also aren't scientific definitions, or there are multiples, I should say. There isn't a single definition around topics like motivation, or even what is a personality, or what is human intelligence, or what is a competency, in these competency models. So there's no real agreement on any of, in the applied psychology field, as to what any of this stuff actually is. And there's all kinds of different answers out there, and they're all called science. And you'd kind of think, well, if this is, I mean, can you imagine, for example, if we were doing this with, say, oxygen? I mean, there's one definition of oxygen. Everybody can look at, an oxygen molecule, and there's no argument that that's what oxygen looks like, for example. Nothing like that whatsoever exists in the field of applied psychology. So that's one part of it. But the other side of that, which goes to the meaning of the title, is that really the answer that they're looking for, that these business leaders are looking for, really has to start in what specifically is the value your organization exists to create. And the process that I've come up with really starts with working with organizational leaders to answer that question. What are the key drivers of value in your business? Which I simply define. What are the things that people give your organization money for? Which could be your customers. They're looking for one thing. But if you have investors, what are they looking for? If you have a bank that's loaning you money, what are they looking for? Um, so it's looking at it from these standpoints, and then understanding what are the results that your organization is producing, that tells you whether or not you're providing that value. And then you kind of work from there to understand, how does each person in your business contribute to that. And the key is, it's not based on the verbs, if you will. It's not based on the things people do, but it's looking at what are the things that people are supposed to deliver in their job. So it's kind of the difference between saying, I have a son, for example, and I, tell him, here's $10, go outside and cut the grass. So I pay my son to cut the grass, and what does he do? He gasses up my tractor and he drives it around the yard a while. But if it's a lousy job, he can say, well, I did the stuff that you told me to do. Okay. But the real issue that I'm not happy about this for is because I paid him to drive my tractor around, but it's because what I want is to buy a trimmed yard. And so it's when you think about it in terms of what are those things that someone's there to create, to actually deliver, uh, it, it gets a lot clearer as to, basically what the job means. And that in itself can be very, very helpful to employees to understand what they're there for. And also, it's a great way for leaders to be able to help employees become successful by delivering those things. But all of that stuff has to start from the leader of the business. And it's not about, what somebody says, somebody's psychological theory around these things, but it's got to start with what's in the leader's head, for what do you want out of this business? And what do you want to buy from your people? So that's part of what the title's about.
Let's talk about the on the flows of the current approach. You argue that things like engagement surveys often measure how people feel rather than what they do. Why is it distinction so critical, and how can it lead organizations astray?
If we're Well, certainly we want to know, are people engaged at work? Are people truly feeling good about being part of the organization? But so often I really believe, because I've been, you know, 3 decades of dealing with the bazillions of employee problems and helping managers deal with those problems and so forth. And listening to my bosses not be happy that we don't seem to be getting anywhere with these things. I really believe that part of the reason that that engagement isn't happening is simply because we're focusing so much of energy and time and thought about in management around giving people, quote unquote, these abstract traits. Again, like kind of how do we improve someone's initiative, you know? And look, managers, uh, nobody really the definitions of what something like a quality like initiative, it changes from person to person. How we even know to what extent it really applies in a job can be very ambiguous. And managers just aren't really equipped in a lot of ways to, how do we grow these things out of people? But if you start instead with thinking about, look, these are the things that I need you to put in my hand, so to speak. These are the things I need you to leave on the desk when you go home at night or change out in the wider world. When you start talking about these things, it's not about abstractions, but look, am I getting this? Am I not? And what does it have to look like? And then, we should be looking rather than rewarding employees because they possess a certain trait or something like that, which is what a lot of these performance appraisals come down to. A lot of people say, you know, we should stop doing the performance appraisals. I don't agree, but I think the problem is that if you look at a lot of performance appraisals, they're really psychological profiles. I mean, we're rating people on the basis of, these qualities like initiative and so forth. But rather than focusing on that, we should be instead appraising employees based on really not the person, but their contribution. So what are you leaving on the desk when you go home at night? What are you putting in the boss's hand? What are you changing in the wider world? And when we start getting into that, now you've got something that a manager can truly start to help an employee improve around. And it's something there again that the company is going to be a lot more excited about it and probably feel a lot better about giving a raise to somebody over because they can agree up front. Hey, these are the things we're looking for from you. You put these things in our hands, that's worth more to you.
Mr. Barry, as an author, what are your short term and long term goals?
Well, my short-term goals are to engage a lot more of the business world around this concept of connecting people to value creation and getting leaders to do the hard thinking about how do they make those kind of connections. And in the longer term, in all sincerity, Daniel, uh, I want to make the workplace a lot better place for everybody. I've been involved in dealing with really bad situations and very deeply frustrated employees and managers who are not very effective and know they're not effective and want to get better. And I know that that's so much of what drives that. 70% of people in the Gallup survey who really don't say they're particularly engaged at work. And I really believe that the answer is not just more inspirational talks, not more ice cream on Fridays and all these kinds of things, but it's just really doing the hard thinking about how does an employee become more successful. And in the long term, I really mean this. I want to put these ideas out there, engage people on these things, and fix a lot of lousy management that's out in the world. Can I give you one little question around this that I like to preach a lot about to people that I think
Go
kind of
ahead. Go ahead, Mr.
encapsulates
Barry.
the thanks. So, we when we start new employees, it's a very many companies very meticulous process. We have these long onboarding checklists, and it's all we make sure there's a chocolate bar tied up with a balloon tied on it and a welcome card on the desk, on day one and things like that. And we make sure people know who everybody is, and we show them here's where the coffee creamer is, and here's where we all meet for ice cream on Fridays and all that stuff. But there's one question every employee asks, what wants to ask when they start a job, and almost no one does, and it's because they know they're not really going to get an answer. And I do speaking, by the way, and I ask even groups of executives, what do you think this question is? And all the times I've done this talk, there's one guy named Zach who's the only guy that ever got an answer that ever got the answer. And I've told people, I promise you, when you hear the answer, everybody here is going to agree with me. And I tell them and the real that question is, what do I have to do to get a raise around here? And you can if it's a salesperson, it's real easy. Go get more sales. But why is the salesperson the only person that can get an answer to that question on day one? And I used to think for a lot of years that the reason was because, I've always worked for the president. They hate getting too committal about raises too far up front. They don't want to get tied down and stuff like that. When they're really not sure how the year is going to go, how somebody's going to work out, things like that. I used to think it was all that, but I really mean this when I say that I've become convinced that there's a deeper reason for that. And it's because they really don't know what these people could do that would give them a raise. And the issue is that it's not that they don't know what they do, it's they don't understand what they deliver. Because it's easy to understand that with a salesperson. But why is the salesperson the only person who can get that answer? And so I really believe when it can be done. I'm doing it with clients. It's very exciting to me and to my clients to watch these things happen, but it's hard. It takes a lot of thinking, and it takes a lot of thinking about jobs in ways that really nobody's ever. I don't think anybody's ever really done before. But so that's my long term goal.
Good luck and looking forward for more success, Mr. Barry,
Thank you.
for your goals in life. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be an author like you?
They want to be an author like me.
Yes.
There's there's three. There's only three steps I know. Get started, work on it every day, and keep working on it until you're done. I mean that's all I can say. This book was 2 years of getting up between 4:30 and 5 o'clock in the morning, and there's no substitute for it. It's just start and keep at it till you're done.
Hmm.
Not easy, but it's that simple.
Not easy, people, but you need to work hard for it. Thank you so much for that advice, Mr. Barry. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Yes, one of the books that's very important to this is a book called Chasing Stars. The subtitle is The Myth of Talent and the Portability of Performance. It was written by a man named Boris Groysberg, who is a Harvard business professor. One of the other ones is a book called Nine Lives About Work by Marshall Goldsmith and the other guy, Ashley Goodall. And a third book would be The Effective Executive by Peter Drucker. So those were three really, really important books kind of in the back that shape a lot of that one.
Thank you for the recommended books, Mr. Barry. And even era of AI and automation, how does your argument become even more critical? How do we ensure humans are focused on the uniquely human high value work?
Boy, that is an awesome question. And I am, I really mean this. It's become kind of a side preoccupation for a while. Is what about all that? I think that I do think I'll preface it this way. I think that from my own, research on this stuff, which is the last couple of months has been, sucked up a lot of my drive time, I guess, on podcasts. I think that it's going to take some people's jobs, but it's not going to. Uh, that phenomenon isn't going to go as deeply as maybe some people are preaching it's going to. But and one of the reasons is because as we're using these large language models, they're only ever able to spit back. I mean, beyond the patterns on the numeric side, but on the verbal side of things, conceptual things, they're only ever to put back out there pretty much what's already been said, what's already been done. It because it's look, I mean, they're all impressive and everything else, but it's just at the end of the day, they're big text predictors. So it's only looking at statistically how many times people, have used words, what comes before them, what comes after them. So the obvious implication there is that it's uh, it, it will only give you ideas that are already out there. So the idea that conceptually it's going to come up with something new, it's really hard to understand how that's going to happen. And it goes back to the other side of that. If I could, it's a one of the reasons I really don't have much confidence that it's going to change a lot and fundamentally for more senior jobs like yours even is because it actually goes back to the research I've done for this book where I looked a lot into the story of intelligence testing and in particular in the workplace and how the question has that topic has played out for the last 100 years. And as of today, we still, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have a consensus in the psychological community of what is intelligence. So and we have in in the AI world, they don't have that answer either. Just a week or so ago, Sam Altman said where the idea of AGI is probably going to be a little problematic because so many different businesses are approaching it in so many different ways, and that's because at the end of the day, they're all proceeding from different models, and the only reason they're doing that is because we don't have one as to what intelligence actually is. So it's kind of hard to see. Then you can't build what you don't understand. So I don't think people should lose hope that it's the killer robots and all that stuff and AI wiping out everybody's jobs. I mean, I really don't think that's what's going to happen.
Well, Mr. Barry, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please don't listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in fifth second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in third season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love letters in fourth season, as well as my movie 101 review and music 101, and my science 101 and sex 101 in each first
Daniel, I was
seasons.
impressed with you before you showed this. I'm amazed. Wow.
Thank you. Thank you. Please listen to them wherever you
I
listen to your
will.
podcast. Thank you, Mr. Barry. Thank you so much. Yes, I'm doing this for 5 years. So if
Wow.
something that I want to materialize, I will do it. Just like I'm planning to have three more podcasts. So imagine, and looking forward for those three more podcasts. So, Mr. Barry, ultimately, if readers take one thing away from your book, what is the fundamental mindset or mindset shift they must take to stop looking in their employees' heads and start looking at the work itself?
That's exactly it. What's the not approaching people by not starting from a question of like what do I want in a person, but what do I want to buy from this job? What I'm going to pay to hire somebody. What do I want to buy from the job? That's where you got to start, and a lot becomes clear when you travel down that mindset.
Mr. Barry Wolfe, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Hoping for more and more empowering books like this to come. So, can
Thank
you
you, Daniel. And
please?
I'm looking forward to more podcasts from you. But I hope you're going to get some sleep sometime.
Yes, I do. I did
Glad to
not.
hear that.
Yes, and I'm inviting you to please do come over on my abstract essay and let's talk about your writing process of It's All in Your Head. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books or whatever projects that
Uh,
you're doing right now?
Certainly, thank you. This is my newest book. My other book is called The Little Black Book of Human Resources Management. You can go to my website for the link argoshr.com. You can also find that one on Amazon along with this one. It's also these are both available on BookBub and of course Goodreads as well. So,
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Barry Wolf because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering advocacy to come. So, Mr. Barry, thank you
and
so much for your time.
thank you so much for the invitation. It's been a real pleasure getting to meet you. And I really am impressed, by the way. I mean it. Wow.
Thank you.
You're a busy
Thank
guy.
you. More to come, people. See you soon.